Good to go.
Welcome back to Senate Education. It's 2:09 on April 12th. We are looking at state colleges, libraries, something we're all familiar with. We've been talking and hearing from people. We have Steve Howard, and then we're going to hear from 3 librarians. And I'm going to try to keep us to 30. We're tight.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Steve Howard, I'm Executive Director of the Vermont State Employees Association, and we represent the staff that work in the libraries, most of whom are on the list. All but one are slated to lose their position. And so I really appreciate the time because I know that this committee is charged with overseeing libraries in the state. I have with me today Elizabeth Bergman, who is a librarian up in the Northeast Kingdom, and we will be joined shortly by Michelle and Miranda, who are clearly I don't know, they're supposed to be joining us on Zoom, so hopefully they'll be here soon. I just wanted to address a few things and sort of set, as they say in the legislature, set the table, and then turn it over to the real experts who can answer your actual questions. This will be the first time in this entire saga of the proposal that came from the president, in which you will hear directly from librarians or from staff that actually work in the library. They are the experts on the impact of this proposal, and they are the experts on what they see from the student body. Just following testimony we just saw, clearly all of us are here because of the students and wanting to pursue the interests of the students, which I think the librarians you'll hear from will talk about that. The one thing I want to just start with is I want to make it clear that our members are not asking you to micromanage the state colleges. We understand that is not the role of the legislature, but we do have some asks of you and some things that we do think fall within your jurisdiction as state senators. First of all, we're asking you to protect the taxpayers' investment. So historically, Vermont has been near the dead last in the country, competing off and on with Mississippi to be the lowest funded state college system in the country. And after, in the recent history, this legislature and the governor have stepped up and invested nearly $200 million to try to get this system to the New England average. And what our members would ask you to do is to think about that investment and your responsibility as legislators to protect that investment. We have heard from the administration that if they had to do this over again, would have rolled this proposal out differently. They apologized to you for the way in which it was rolled out. Unfortunately, the damage from their decision-making and their process, which, by the way, did not consult the experts in the libraries who know about the libraries, it's made from folks who know very little about the libraries, has done a real damage to the enrollment numbers of the state college system. And we are seriously in a crisis now where the whole system could collapse. And that $200 million investment could be really lost. So our members would ask you to protect the taxpayers' investment and to take that as part of your role as overseers of the revenues of the state. The second thing we would ask you to do is to protect your local library. The Vermont Library Association has opposed this proposal, and librarians across the state have spoken out against this proposal. And one of the things they say, and I'm just looking at a WCAX story, Nate Eddy, who's the librarian in Winooski, really talked about the fact this proposal does not adequately assess the cost of a digital library, and that he really thinks it is not a well-conceived proposal. And then the secretary of the Library Association is also quoted in that story as calling this really a huge blow to the smaller libraries that rely on the university's collections. And you're going to hear that from the librarians who are going to testify. So we're asking you to protect the taxpayers' investment before the whole system collapses, and that's really where we are at this point because of the damage of this media coverage that the president's proposal generated. We're asking you to protect your local libraries. Vermont is one of the top states in the country for usage by citizens of its libraries. We're asking you to step in as state senators and protect your local libraries from the damage of this proposal. I think you just heard from many from the students who testified before us about the value of this system in workforce development. and how important this system is in workforce development. We could lose this asset if the legislature does not take action. And this legislature has done that previously. When the previous chancellor made really what we would call a giant self-inflicted wound and proposed a plan to close campuses, there was a massive impact on the enrollment in those state colleges. The legislature stepped up, invested heavily into the system, started to make progress, and here we are again with another self-inflicted wound. We're asking you to step in and to protect that investment, protect your libraries, and protect this asset for Vermonters who are using it now and who will use it. What's our ask? Our ask is that that your committee and your recommendation to the Appropriations Committee would vote to eliminate all or some of the $5 million cut, even if it's just $500,000, and that you would send a very strongly worded message to the trustees of this system that you would urge them to accept this relief from the cut that they have been asked to produce as a sign that the will of the people, the students, the faculty, the community, and the staff, and hopefully the legislature joining in with librarians from all across the state, that message would be sent to the trustees that this proposal should be withdrawn and that we should go back to the drawing board and try to have a more inclusive, well thought out discussion about how to support the Vermont State Colleges. So with that, I just want to turn this over to the people who really know what they're talking about. But I did want to just sort of give you a sense of what's at stake, what we're asking for. And I wanted just to make it absolutely clear that we are not asking you to become the overseers of the state college, but to protect the taxpayers, protect your constituents, and protect the investment you make.
Would you like to start? Just the order here.
Well, let's see. Elizabeth is here. So if Elizabeth, you're ready to go.
And Bergman, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Elizabeth Bergman said, I live in St. Johnsbury. I do the interlibrary loan for Northern Vermont Linden, and I've been there for 11 years. I'm also an alum of Linden, but I'm speaking to you today as a private citizen. Speaking based on my experience, I'm opposed to this plan of the colleges, primarily being digital, and the proposal to eliminate the library staff. Our state colleges are home to many first-generation students who don't have family members to turn to advice on colleges, and also non-traditional students returning to school after years and perhaps being out of school and finding that things have changed or are very different now, dealing with jobs and families. Under this plan, the libraries will suffer from understaffing because the staff that they're eliminating do much more than just manage the collections. They manage the operations of the library. The short staffing of the libraries will lead to diminished student experience, and that will negatively impact recruitment and retention of students, and we are already seeing that. The 1.5 positions now proposed to remain will not be able to manage the workload, even if we remove books. Interlibrary loan program is also going to suffer under this proposal, and it will add to expenses. Right now, anything the library doesn't have, we get for students through interlibrary loan, usually for free. And we've been doing this for years. Students can pick up items on campus or request to have them mailed to their homes if they're only taking online classes or not directly connected to a campus, as many of the CCB students are. So the part of the new plan about students not now being able to access items on or off campus isn't a new idea. Ebook lending has also been called the Wild West of ILL. They cannot be lent like physical books, so our students will not have access to as much material as they do now. Since interlibrary loan works reciprocally, I also fear that with our limited collection and inability to lend ebooks, even if public libraries wanted only ebooks, we will have nothing to offer other libraries, and they will eventually stop lending to us. Once we can't borrow from other libraries, the college will have to buy these materials for students. That's going to get expensive. In 2018-19, we borrowed 572 items for Linden alone, to give an idea. This decision will also impact the community and other libraries. With interlibrary loan, as said before, if we go primarily digital, we won't be able to lend to other libraries eventually, I don't think. We lend a lot of materials to other libraries, the VSC, Vermont Publics, and out-of-state libraries. Many small Vermont publics and school libraries rely on ILL to get what they need with small budget or small libraries. Again, in 2018-19, we lent 853 items. And in the past 10 years, we've lent 7,852 items. Many of the Vermont public libraries lend to us regularly. One of the arguments for the proposed plan is that circulation and ILL have decreased over the years. So we don't need it, right? While that is true, it's not unique to the VSC, nor has it decreased to the amount where students do not want items and will not miss these services. Currently, there is no ILL person at VTC. So the students there can only get digital resources, articles, ebooks from our databases, or articles from ILL. There's no form for requesting physical items. The students are still trying to find ways to request those physical items, though. I believe this speaks to the fact that they do not want or are not fully served with only digital resources, and we do our students and faculty a real disservice by not offering ILL for physical items. In a small place like Vermont, we need to stay connected and help each other out. ILL and other college outreach programs are a way to do this, but the proposed plan is going to severely limit all our connections to the community and potential students. We are still recovering from the isolation of the pandemic, and this is not going to help us grow or thrive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Williams.
Curiosity, just heard CCV. Most of their students are not residents. How do they do it? It seems like they've got pretty good results academically. And do they use your libraries? Do they do digital library searches?
They do. So they can do digital. The CCV does not have a library of their own. So they are free to come in and use our libraries. They're close to any of our campuses. If they need to do interlibrary loan, what's happened is that they're connected to partners. So that's the Randolph, the BTC, and the person there has done it and has filled for anywhere. Since there's no one there, the Johnson person has them taking up there. But again, there's nobody there, so they cannot get physical items. So that means that anybody, the CCD students, as well as the BTC students, currently cannot get physical items.
Senator Gilbert.
Can I add something to that? As I come from the wall, apparently. I'm Michelle. I'm at Castleton. I just wanted to add that interlibrary loan here at Castleton, the majority of our physical requests would come from CCV students. And that changed at the end of February when they were not allowed to get physical books anymore. But they were the majority of our requests for physical books were CCV students, and then we mail them directly to them.
Senator Gilbert.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. When I was a high school librarian, I kept really detailed stats and data, partially just because I wanted evidence for my reason to exist from year to year when I would go and talk to the administration. So that data was super important. We haven't been given any data in this committee around circulation, visits to the library, any of those like critical numbers that I always kept really, close eye on. Like, do we have circulation stats? How many visits you get per school year? Anything like that?
Pertaining to ILL specifically?
No, they're not
just-
ILL related at all. Just the libraries themselves.
Yes, so yes, I don't have the circulation with me. I was focusing on the ILL side. We do
That would be great.
keep track of the circulation and as such. I agree with Michelle that for the VSC, the majority of what we send out for the VSC people go to CCV. Many years ago, a number of years ago, all of us started separating out specifically CCV numbers to VSC so we could see it separated out, and mostly go to CCV.
Awesome, and I do have an ILL question too, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
Can you interlibrary loan with the University of Vermont, and can you interlibrary loan out of state as well?
Yes.
Okay.
And we do Dartmouth, we do a lot with Dartmouth, but we also do with bigger places. We do a lot with the Boston Public and New York Public and Cornell and some of the big places.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams.
Just that data is important, I think, for your case, for sure. The more you can get those, the better off you'll be.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually follow up a little bit on Senator Williams' question. One data element that we've been kind of dancing around and talking about for several months now, but haven't really heard anything, is there any collaboration between the professors and the librarians on, professors have syllabus which have, you know, an element of hard copy requirement, an element of soft copy, you know, links to articles, whatever that is, just to kind of prove the case that we're not ready to go full digital because for example, the professors are still, you know, requiring hard copy. You know, hard copy is still part of the syllabus as opposed to, you know, being fully digital. Any kind of information available?
We still have our whole shelf of reserves, and I do still get regularly checked out. And things do get put on it. I say, I'm not quite sure how to answer the question.
Well, okay, so let me rephrase it a little
Yeah.
bit. So interlibrary loans is one concept, okay? Yeah,
Right.
but reserves it's hard copy. It requires somebody to be there to, it's, you know, and that just kind of proves the case that we're not quite ready to go that far to 100% digital. But, you know, there's, again, back to the data point, at least there's some tangible information that, you know, kind of says, okay, look, just, you know, slow down on this initiative, this 100% digital initiative, because of just, you know, this, you know.
There are
What?
issues also with like putting, especially if it's videos, we have some professors who have a number of videos on reserve and like to show videos in class. And this showed up, especially over the pandemic when we had to do more on Zoom and such. We come up with issues with licensing for showing movies, especially in class, but that's a large number of groups, that you can't stream, licensing wise, you're not allowed to stream in class or something. You need either to use the actual video, or you need to at least have the video if you're going to stream it in class, because we're not showing it in public or something. So there are issues, or it doesn't come out as well or something if you're trying to stream through multiple things. So there are issues with just going digital, especially video.
I'm gonna jump in again, but this time I put my video on. I just
Well,
wanted to
hold on,
ask.
Ms. Perry, I think we're going to switch altogether to you right now.
Oh, so
So-
I'll save it for a
So-
second.
And I would say, one way to think about this testimony is share new information. We don't, not that your plan would be to repeat anything that Ms. Bergman said, but we heard something. Now, what new information can you add to that? We'll ask the same of Ms. Axworthy. Please.
Oh, it's my turn.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
my name's Michelle Perry. I live in Fairhaven. I am speaking as a private citizen. I'm in my 16th year at Castleton and I work in the library. I'm the cataloger, archivist, and currently interim interlibrary loan. I will keep my comments brief. Thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate that for us the people actually doing the work to come and speak with you. I feel that physical libraries with books and digital services supported by trained librarians are the core function of each institution of higher education. The decision to close the traditional libraries and fire trained staff, if left unchanged, will hurt students, will hurt library services such as reserves, and this where I'll throw in my little reserve to answer that question. The faculty members request books that they want to support their classes. We don't purchase textbooks, but we will put them on reserve for them if they have them. But that's where they're requesting physical books for their classes to be put on reserve or just to add to our collection so students have access to them, particularly on like new topics, which Miranda can give you more examples of that, but just saying about reserves. And it will also shut down functional, local, and regional interlibrary loan programs, which we've discussed, and will hurt the institutions themselves as fewer students will choose to attend our state colleges. The decisions have sent just about every wrong message that can be sent by institutions seeking to increase enrollment. Projected enrollment at the campuses for next academic year is down. Requests for existing students for paperwork to transfer to other institutions are up. As I do my presentation today, there are a few things that we would like to request your assistance with. First, we request that your committee recommend reversing the decision to fire the librarians and convert the libraries to mostly digital. Second, we request your committee to recommend withdrawing the $5 million per year for 5 years for a total of $25 million. And the third would be to request the committee to consider the impact of the administration's proposed actions on the health and longevity of the institutions, the students, faculty, staff, and the communities they serve. The General Assembly should not have, on one hand, expect the states to increase enrollment at the same time cut $25 million during these times of inflation. The mandatory budget reduction decision made in 2021 and never adjusted to account for raging inflation in 2022 and 2023 are cutting into core functions of the campuses at Castleton, Randolph, Lyndon Johnson, and the Community College of Vermont. State agencies and departments of state government have had their budgets reviewed and adjusted every January through the Budget Adjustment Act. On behalf of the students, faculty, and staff at the state colleges, we ask for the same consideration. What was initially supposed to be an enhancement of existing libraries by increasing digital services ended up being a plan to dump most books, fire the librarians, and effectively cancel the interlibrary loan program. A perfect trifecta. Dumping books and firing librarians will hurt students who don't know how to use the library, will hurt the institutions by causing a likely decline in enrollment, and will hurt the communities by effectively ending their interlibrary loan program. The administration claims this approach is consistent with the principles driving this transformation: student first, purpose first, and digital first. However, nowhere in this entire plan does it reflect the students' thoughts and requests. As you have seen and heard over the past 2 months, students and faculty are outraged at this proposal, and they have loudly protested on the campuses, to the Board of Trustees, and here at the State House. Regrettably, some students are also protesting with their feet and with their education dollars. Many apparently are delaying decisions to re-enroll, and they are taking steps to transfer out and enroll in other institutions. We are also facing the loss of financial donations that not only support the library, but the general fund as well. The library at Castleton University is a safe, welcoming space for students, faculty, staff, researchers, authors, artists, and community members to spend their time reading and learning. The librarians help each one of them by helping them find books and publications, teaching them how to use the library and other resources, including online digital resources. The other piece that I want to mention today is the federal work study piece. We rely on that to employ the students in the library. Here at Castleton, there's currently 27. Federal work study funds require that for an institution to qualify, 7% of the jobs on campus must be community service based. The state college libraries contribute to this percentage with the number of work study jobs available in the libraries. Will the colleges be approved for work study funding? Perhaps, and we won't know until after July 1st. The state colleges are often credited with providing college opportunities for first-generation students and for a new generation of the Vermont workforce. I believe it is imperative the General Assembly continue to work with these educational resources. Thanks again.
Senator Lentz. So just for my edification, isn't this mandate of $5 million already law? Wasn't there an act that required this?
It was part of the 2021 budget.
So what's the likelihood we're gonna be able to undo that in a short period of time?
Well, the legislature is a powerful organization, frankly. And I don't know if there are penalties if they didn't do it. In other words, I don't know what kind of penalties would come if all of a sudden they did not actually meet that plan. Thank you. Ms. Axworthy.
Hi. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Senate Education Committee. As you know, my name is Miranda Axworthy. I'm a resident of Rutland City, and I'm currently employed as a reference and instruction librarian at Castleton. Under the announced plan to transform the libraries, my job won't be terminated. I'm not losing my job. However, some very talented coworkers who've helped countless library guests have an incredible experience at our libraries are being terminated. If implemented, the plan will result in a loss for the students, the faculty, and the regions the libraries serve. With a declining applicant pool, the Vermont State Colleges should take steps to encourage applicants to enroll or stay enrolled. To suggest there will be fewer or no librarians and fewer or no books are not selling points that will attract the limited number of individuals looking to attend college. Here's some information that may surprise you in light of some of what you've been told. Students still strongly desire print materials. The Florida Virtual Campuses 2022 Student Textbook and Instructional Materials Survey analyzed survey data from nearly 14,000 students at a variety of colleges and universities in Florida. And although textbooks and other instructional materials are increasingly available in digital formats, over 82% of the respondents still wanted an option to get a low-cost paper copy. Instead of just the digital version. Print circulation has been declining at libraries around the country for a long time. So while many libraries are shifting more resources into digital collections and spending less on print, which is exactly what our staff proposed, very few have decided to discontinue supporting print altogether. Professor Linda Olson recently told you she only found one public residential college whose library was fully online. Not all books and educational materials are available in a digital format. Castleton recently purchased 20 new books on trauma that our faculty requested. Only 2 were available as ebooks. I will add here that the administration's revised plan should allow us to keep some physical collections, but it's still extremely unclear whether we'll have be allowed to continue purchasing print materials, which means that we won't be able to maintain up-to-date collections, and our faculty and students are going to have to purchase books themselves if we can't license a digital copy. And importantly, we can't just purchase a Kindle copy from Amazon or something. Even if that format exists, there may not be a digital version that libraries can license. Additionally, ebooks for libraries typically are significantly more expensive and unstable than print books. As you said, you heard a lot about interlibrary loan from Elizabeth and also from Michelle. And so I won't speak too much to that. I will say that with the lending of ebooks, there are some digital models that are starting to gain ground, but a recent court case between a group of publishers led by Hatchet Book Group and against the Internet Archive may have a cooling effect on those models. That still remains to be seen, but at the very least, that issue really is not settled. But the right of first sale with print is well established. Once you own a print book, you own it forever and you can lend it. We send our print collection all over the state and to remote students and to public and college libraries for Vermonters to use. And we can't make our digital collections available to people who aren't students, faculty, or staff of our institutions due to the publisher's licenses. The data being used to justify this decision is misleading without context. We can't directly compare electronic usage data with print usage data because they capture different kinds of use, which is why it's important to look at a variety of kinds of data in order to make responsible collections decisions. The data for digital materials is unsurprisingly much more granular and it captures a lot more browsing data than we can get with print. It's really easy to pull a book off a shelf, skim through the table of contents, or read the first few pages and put it back where it was, and we never know. We ask people not to reshelve books for that reason, so that we can record in-house uses, but a lot of people do it anyways. But if you open an ebook or a digital article for a similar use, that kind of skim a bit or read the abstract or something, that use does get counted. So a lot of the figures that are being presented, like 96% of our usage being digital versus 4% being print, are misleading. The libraries also changed our cataloging system in 2018, and some usage data was lost during that transition. That means we don't have a complete record of usage prior to that, and we can't give an accurate account of how much of our collection has never circulated, despite the figures that the administration keeps using. And it's worth noting that not all of a collection circulates at any given time. The 80-20 rule is pretty well established within libraries. 20% of your collection is responsible for 80% of your circulation. But the part that circulates changes over time based on research trends, faculty research interests, programs offered, et cetera. Which is why we collect broadly and we use our professional expertise in addition to data when we make collections decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Gillis, please.
Thank you. I've heard this a few times now, and I just want to speak to it a little bit. And I would ask my fellow librarians that using the Internet Archive as an example of digital resources, to me, is kind of conflating a bunch of issues, because the Internet Archive is, I mean, we just know it's not like a vetted source of internet material. It is the Wild West of internet. And we know that some of the documents on that site were just scanned on someone's scanner and put up there as a PDF. And so I would just ask that you please don't use that as an example of an online source that has like veracity and scholarly approval.
I recognize that. The only reason I mentioned it was the fact that it triggered a lot of conversations among libraries about what implications there might be for controlled digital lending. And who knows, it may not have any impact on that, but that's still an area that is not consistent. And as Elizabeth mentioned, we can't loan whole ebooks. And so that's, it remains to be seen whether that's coming down the line at some point or, hopefully we'll sort that out eventually, but it's still limited.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Weeks.
I just wanted to follow up on Senator Bullock's question, or comment. But there are academic repositories that you subscribe to, which do provide the rigid.
Yes, and
lots of folks look at these. I just don't want folks to think that that this is an effort to push students towards Google searches as opposed to academic, rigid academic peer review, stuff like that.
Yeah. The issue is more with whole ebook lending, because you can easily get articles, so chapters from books and things. That's not really not really an issue. But to get an entire ebook, very few places are licensed. You have to, when you get the ebook, you have to work with the vendor to get licensed to be able to like the whole ebook. And about maybe a handful of libraries have this license, are licensed to let out of thousands of libraries that have physical books that can let.
So what's the cost for electronic licensure? Any idea?
I don't know, since I don't do catalogs. That's
I
my
might be interested to find
area.
out if you had to go completely digital, if they had to buy them all, or to pay
I
for
do.
license.
I have heard that it is more expensive, and there's especially subscriptions do need to be at least once a year, like yearly, right? Are going to the subscription especially are going to be renewed, and the renewal I've heard is usually many times will increase maybe about 5%.
If you came to me and said, If we digitize this entire library, it's gonna cost $6 million. That makes sense.
And you're not gonna be able to replace every book because every book is not digitized. And then
Yeah,
the
it's,
lending, that we won't be able to lend, we're not licensed to lend our ebooks. So anybody who asks us for an entire ebook, I have to automatically say no.
I'm afraid we have to leave it there for now. This has been very helpful. We have a full afternoon of additional testimony, but I want to thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Ms. St. James, would you join us at the table?
thank you.
Thank you. Committee H483, an act relating to the accountability and oversight of approved independent schools that are eligible to receive public tuition. Today, we're going to take a look just for some background information. I was not on the committee when Acts 49 and 173 were passed. I understand there's some connection between these acts and the bill itself. So I asked Ms. St. James just to give us some background. And then we are going to hear from Eric Romberg, who I believe is listed as the Compass School, but he is the Association of Independent Schools person, I think. After that, tomorrow you'll notice that we're going to pick up on 483, and hopefully this background will help our conversations. So with that, Ms. St. James.
Sure, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. So I just want to give a small sneak preview of what we're going to dive into here, and that is that Act 49, believe what you are interested in. So Act 49 of 2017 was a miscellaneous ed bill. It was 66 pages or 60-something pages.
Okay.
And there was one section in there, 56 pages. There's one section there that created the Approved Independent School Study Committee, section 42, and we'll walk through what their charge was. But they didn't come up, they didn't really reach a consensus on it.
Okay.
So there was some work done, and actually the report that you have from the committee is really just a couple page, 2 page, 3 page. It's really just a page and a half, and then the language from the bill itself, summary of what the committee looks like, and a bunch of appendices of the work of the committee.
So the pro tem was the chair of this committee at that point.
Okay.
And so I think what would be helpful is just to understand what their charge was, and just kind of, again, just give us some background. There seems to be conversations out there that there might be something in here that could be helpful to us in terms of what's happened in the past.
Sure. So I'm going to go back to what I was saying and just say, I am not prepared to talk about, nor do I think we have time to talk about the individual positions of everyone on the committee, which was basically what the committee produced, was a bunch of individual positions. So the public schools positions, the independent schools positions, and then there was a statement that there was a unanimous agreement that students with disabilities should be free to attend the schools that they, their parents, and their local education agency deem appropriate to them. But that was it. There was no legislative language. There was work that was done that was picked up on in Act 173.
Okay.
But the committee itself didn't. It didn't have a lot of consensus. So in November 2015, the State Board of Education proposed some amendments to the 2200 series, which you all know by now is the rule series that applies to the approval of independent schools. Those amendments proved to be controversial, and the rulemaking took quite a bit of time, and it never really finished by the time the legislature got to business in January of 2017. So the Senate Committee on Education began taking testimony in January 2017 on the proposed amendments to the 2200 series.
Okay.
And then this is a statement directly from the report. After several months of committee testimony and consultations between the state board and the independent school representatives, it became clear that agreement would remain elusive on those amendments to the rules. So what Act 49 did in 2017 is it paused the rulemaking on the 2017. And it created this approved independent schools study committee to consider and make recommendations on the criteria to be used by the State Board of Education for designation as an approved independent school, including the following things: school's enrollment policy and any limitation on a student's ability to enroll, how the school should be required to deliver special education services and which categories of these services, and the scope and nature of financial information and special education information that should be required to be reported by the school to the state board or to AOE. So that was its charge. It also, Act 49 also paused rulemaking, and so the language from the act is, it is the intent of the General Assembly to resolve the issues raised by the state board's proposed amendments to the 2200 series that were initiated. The rulemaking was initiated in November of 2015. And then the thought would be that the state board would then re-engage in the rulemaking after taking into account the report of the committee under required under subsection E of the section, so the report that the independent school study committee was required to make. So rulemaking was suspended, and then they were required to re-engage in rulemaking once the committee issued its report. Committee's report, I believe, was issued in December of 2017. This is a little bit of a mystery to me. The report of the Independent School Study Committee is not, I cannot find it on the legislature's reports page.
Okay.
But I did pull it from the Education Committee's website.
Okay.
And the presentation that was given on January 9th, 2018. So the study committee did not reach a consensus on any draft legislative language. The study committee did unanimously agree that Vermont students with disabilities should be free to attend the schools that they, their parents, and their local education agencies are appropriate to them. The report does contain proposed language to address the financial capacity piece that they were charged with looking at, but the language was ultimately not agreed to by the study committee. Act 173 did add the financial reporting requirements that you see in section 166, subdivision B8 today.
Okay.
So that work, I think, so the study committee's work, I think, got everyone to a certain point. There was no consensus reached. That language was added as an appendix to the report. And then somehow out of that, the legislature added some financial reporting requirement language to section 166 in the next legislative session.
Okay.
So there was a lot of work done there that I'm sure the committee, the legislature relied on. And so the report contains appendices with proposed language for the report from both the independent schools community and the public school community. And that's the bulk of it. So there's a link, I provided Hayden, so it should be on your website with a link to the report of the approved independent school study committee.
We have it. Yeah.
So if you look, the table of contents, the summary, the committee's charge, meeting the witnesses, and then starting on page 4 is appendices.
We have a committee makeup also.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is what Senator Booth chaired. Okay. And so basically what they were told, so out of this, not so much came out of this per se. I'm trying to get an understanding of, so 173, the 2200 series, where did that really come
So,
from?
173, I did a little preview, I did a little walkthrough of 173 way back in the beginning.
Yep.
That came out of an act in 2016. So part of why this is kind of hard to articulate is
Yeah.
usually when the legislature creates a study committee, they have a report and they make recommendations, right? There's a consensus, maybe not everyone, but the committee has a deliverable.
Okay.
There wasn't really something like that here.
That's really helpful to me. I mean, I heard there have been conflicts, so understandable.
But, and I wasn't here.
Yeah.
In 2018, when the committee picked this, when the Senate Education Committee picked this up.
Okay,
But what came out of 2018 was Act 173.
okay.
And so there was a lot of discussion and work done in that study committee that I'm sure informed the legislature's work and allowed them to power through 173 Act in creating 173. But Act 173 related to the independent schools, right? This was an approved independent school study committee. Act 173 was about a whole lot more than just the provision of special education in independent schools, right? That was just a piece of it. So Act 173 itself, you all should have a link to that as well. In 2016, the General Assembly commissioned a couple reports under Act 148 regarding the delivery of special education services and funding.
Okay.
And the recommendations from those reports are largely what led to Act 173. I don't believe Act 49 is referenced at all in Act 173.
Okay.
It's the reports and the work that was done in Act 148 of 2016 that really led to the work in Act 173.
And while you're on that moment, can you tell us then what is in Act 173? Just so everybody knows exactly what's going to happen on July 1st, 2023.
Yep, it's July 1. So for, you mean the entire act itself?
Nope, just the stuff related to the special
Independent
education
schools?
and independent schools. Yeah.
So as of July 1, 2023, if an approved independent school wants to be eligible to receive public tuition, they have to agree to accept any student placed with them on an IEP if that placement is made by either the local education agency or the student's IEP team.
Okay.
It does not mean that the parents can say, we think this is the best fit for our child and we want the child to go here. The placement has to be made by the LEA or the school's IEP. Hopefully the child's family is a part of that decision-making process. There's also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so just so I know, so Act 173, July 1, 2023, if I had a child that wanted to go to an approved independent school anywhere in the state, you know, and I lived in this, so all those things come together, that child were on an IEP. As long as the IEP team agrees, or the LEA not agrees, but is making the placement, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Even if, for example, let's say there's school, you know, Montpelier Day School, if it existed, whatever it might be, whatever its mission, the LEA team and the IEP team feel like this is a good spot. Brian Jr. is going. I have to say yes.
If they want to accept public
If they want the
funds.
public tuition. Okay, that's helpful. Okay.
Yes. There was also a significant piece related to funding
Okay.
that I am not prepared to, I'm sorry, I did not know that.
No, it's okay.
I'm not prepared to walk through that today. But there is new funding mechanisms that kick into effect on July 1, 2023 for approved independent schools for the provision of special education services. And part of that, again, I certainly cannot speak to what the committee considered when they, or what the legislature considered when they wrote Act 173. I was not there.
Sure.
But a lot of the talk or comments, if you do look at the act that, or the report that came out of Act 49, is if students are going to, students on an IEP or with special education needs are going to be attending these approved independent schools, where's the public funding to help with that? So there was discussion about that, and there were positions taken in that study committee, but there was no unanimous recommendation made on how to do that. But Act 173 came out in the next legislative session and solves that debate.
So on the floor, if we were asked, what's the connection between Act 49 and this work that we're doing? What I could say is this was kind of a precursor, if you will. There was a study committee put together, but the study committee itself was inconclusive. But Senate Education picked it up in 2018. Senate Education took some of the work in there, looked at the special education issues as it relates to independent schools, and they passed Act 173 that again is going to affect July 1, 2023.
Yes, the lawyer in me has
Okay.
to say
Yeah, no,
that I could never say yes.
That
sure,
sounds right,
say-
right, yeah.
Well, no, say that they looked at it, right? Because I don't know what they looked at.
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
know that they had a presentation on this report
Okay,
and that some of the issues that bubbled up out of their discussion certainly are reflected in Act 1. Decisions were made in Act 173. But I think really importantly is that the rules then, rulemaking began again after this report. So the report was really to resolve the issues raised by the rulemaking process in the 2200 series. And so there were no unanimous recommendations in the study committee, but rulemaking began again. And it did not finish until last spring. And that's the 2200 series that we're working with now.
so before we get 2200 series, Act 173, one of the things in the new bill talks about enrollment. And as I understand it, to simplify it, if you're in a choice town, there's a school there, you want public funding, we're opening the door in terms of admission, maybe not opening the door, but we're not requiring certain things that may have happened before.
Are you talking about the prohibition on like requiring?
Applications, interviews,
yes,
things like that. Does that impact the IEP team in the LEA at all? Are they still, for example, one of the things I just want to make sure isn't going to happen is some kid arrives somewhere and it doesn't work out. So are the IEP team and the LEA still involved at all? Or does
Yes, so
okay.
the H 483
Yeah,
prohibits an approved independent school that wants to be eligible to receive public tuition
okay,
from requiring certain things as part of the admissions process.
right.
And that would be, I believe, an interview, a campus visit, looking at academic history or requiring an academic entrance exam. But it doesn't, that's the school requiring something from a student.
Yeah,
That's certainly not an IEP team, or just a family with a student who does not have a disability seeking information
okay.
from the school,
Yeah, of
if
course,
you will.
right. Senator Hush.
Just a quick point of clarification that I'd like to make for 483, talking about the interviews. It says mandatory interviews. So I just want to confirm that a school can still suggest, hey, come talk to us before you get enrolled here, but they can't use that as part of determining whether or not they can enroll.
The bill prohibits mandatory interviews. I think it would be a fact-based analysis on whether a suggestion is really mandatory or a suggestion. So I'm not prepared to say absolutely that would be allowed.
Yeah.
I think it would be that I can envision a world in which it is pure and innocent and absolutely voluntary. And I can also envision
Sure.
a fact pattern where it's, why
You gotta
don't
be
you
here.
come see us and talk to us,
Yeah.
and very coercive.
Yeah,
So,
just a very quick comment.
please.
I also see both of those paths diverging, and I mean, I'm thinking to, like when I moved to Rhode Island, we took a informal tour of the public school. We had a quick 20-minute meeting with the principal. Obviously, none of it was mandatory. As I'm thinking of trying to create these parallel tracks, I just don't want to. I don't want to completely hamstring the schools if the goal is to make it so that there's more parallels between public and private schools. So I don't know if that made any sense, but.
that's your goal.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah, I'm just sharing with the committee. I know it's not.
Yeah. Is it your thing?
I have no thing. Yes, so that piece, the prohibition on the admissions, pieces of the admissions process is a prohibition on the school, not on families seeking out to do some of those things.
It's a great way to look at it.
Tour the
That's helpful.
campus, here are my grades, don't you want me?
Yeah. Okay. Any questions on 173 right now before we push to 2200?
Well,
Go ahead.
I do, and I'm probably being dense, and it is getting late, and it's been a very long day, but,
Last 3 o'clock.
what, so will schools be, required to provide all of the same supports that public schools, would an independent school that takes a student on an IEP be required to provide all of these supports? that
Great
are
question.
So the provision of special education services is the responsibility of the supervisory union, the local education agency, federal requirement. And in Vermont, that's the supervisory union. So at the supervisory union level for public schools in operating districts, the SU is overseeing the provision of special education services. And in non-operating districts, the SU is still the required entity to be meeting all of those needs. The 2200 series, and I am not the best person to walk you through the 2200 series and the rules related to the provision of special education services in independent schools. I would highly recommend, if you want to hear about that, you ask someone from the field, whether that's AOE or the state board, or, but there is a whole provision in there in the rules of how those services can be provided. It can be provided through the school themselves. They can be provided through the public school teachers, some agreement between public programs and the private programs. I believe there's a provision in there for contracting of services. So there's the rules. The rules provide a range of options, but it is ultimately, if someone has a dispute about the provision of services for their child, it's a supervisory union's responsibility to be ensuring that those services are being provided.
Yeah, please.
General question, very general, but since some of us here are new, is this part of our government, i.e. education, is it more rule heavy than others? It just seems like we're referring to rules a lot. Now, my only other committee is health and welfare, so, but I mean, it just seems like rules are, no?
Good question. Comes to judiciary.
Oh, okay, I gotta come hang out in judiciary for a while.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I couldn't answer.
I think that's really subjective.
Okay.
The point of rulemaking is, first of all of the rules should be, when agencies are making rules, they should be doing it within the authority that is delegated to them by the legislature. And you should be clear in your intent on what those rules should contain, the parameters within which they should work. But you are not the subject matter experts, right? The Board of Nursing is the subject matter experts. The State Board of Education are the subject matter experts. So part of the philosophy behind rulemaking is you're delegating. You don't have the time or the expertise to micromanage and make the rules necessary for everything to hum along efficiently here in committee. So you delegate some of that authority to administrative agencies to use their subject matter expertise and the time that they have to pick up where the legislature left off. There's very little in statute, for example, on nursing, but their rules are vast.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I think that's probably pretty
help?
subjective.
Yeah, thank you. Sounds like no is a simple answer. but-
Yeah. So back to Senator Dulick's question about districts. So every school district, the buck stops in terms of the federal government's doing, in terms of the special ed. Special ed we know is very federally oriented. If a school isn't providing that, it's the district, whether you're operating or non-operating, that's responsible.
Supervisory union.
Supervisory union, okay, okay. So we also have the headline, 3/4 of our public schools are under scrutiny for not providing special ed. correctly, or there's some headline out there, I think we've all seen it bigger yesterday. But doesn't stop with the school. Again, it's the supervisory union that we would look to say, hey, what's going on in those schools?
So it's layered. So
Okay.
ultimately, in the state of Vermont, education is services provided by the state,
Okay,
the state.
yeah,
And then every district is a little different. and
Sure.
The needs of every district is gonna be a little different geographically, socioeconomically, economy of scale, everything. And so it's the local education agency's responsibility to provide for those services. If there was such a dearth of services being offered, I can certainly look into this and come back and speak to you about kind of the complaint hierarchy or that oversight hierarchy. But at a very basic level, the supervisory union on a day-to-day basis is responsible for providing the special education services. But in Vermont, it's ultimately the state's responsibility for the provision of education to its students. And I don't know, sitting here today, if there was such a dearth of services being provided that there needed to be a legal challenge. I don't know who would be the plaintiff in that case.
but in this case, we're saying independent schools, you're gonna do this July 1, and the services are going to fall to the LEAs or the supervisory unions, and the feds kind of, sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's not that the services fall to the LEA.
Okay,
It's that it's their responsibility to ensure that those services are being provided.
Perfect.
So it could be that the independent school has a robust special education
Great.
program.
but if not, this is the time you better get one.
It would be, I believe that the 2200 series allows for a range of options of how those services would be provided with the LEA working with the independent school to ensure that the students' needs are being met. That is like a very basic.
What's that?
That was a much better way of phrasing it.
Certainly is.
No, so what I just heard was kind of this whole conversation is that it's the supervisory union that is going to be paying the independent school, right? And then
Well-
the money follows the student.
Yes, so the school district
Yep.
is the one that budgets.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
And if you're in a non-operating district, which is mainly what we're talking about here, is tuition
Yeah.
students. If you're in a non-operating district, then the general education tuition will follow that student. There's a whole separate bucket of money and calculation for special education money. So on top of the general ed tuition.
So who makes sure that the school that's receiving the student meets the standard? Is that the supervisory union's responsibility?
When you say the standard, what do you mean?
For the
Special education.
special education?
Yes, it would be the supervisory union's responsibility, but there's going to be lots of responsibilities on either side of that responsibility for communication, and
Yeah.
there's probably going to be folks in roles who have responsibility. But ultimately, it's the supervisory, it's not the approved independent schools' responsibility to ensure that special education services are being provided under IDEA, right? That's the local education agency, which in Vermont is supervisory union. But I don't want to say that the independent school has no responsibility. They have a lot of responsibility, right? It just depends on the specific situation and the child's needs and within the range of options available in the 2200 series for how those services are provided. Everyone's going to have a different role to play. And so, but ultimately, if a student needs services, it's the supervisory union's responsibility to ensure that those services are being provided.
Actually, it's more of a question for you. So over the next couple of weeks or week before we really, vote on this particular bill, and given the focus on special education, and given in that, I'm curious if the definition of disabilities has morphed over time, and if there'll be a representative in the next couple days who could at least address that question. For example, if a parent comes up and says, my child is antisocial, this is not the right fit, you know, is the definition of disabilities beginning to kind of expand given the nature of youth?
Well, when you say IEP, you also mean 504.
No.
Okay.
So there's multiple levels here, so, there's federal definitions for disabilities, and students, who meet those definitions would qualify for an IEP, an individualized education program. And then there's section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which is a separate category of disabilities. And then in Vermont, we have multi-tiered systems of support. And Act 173 actually kind of expands the support options and the categories of needs or students that might qualify for additional support outside of an IEP or a section 504 plan. And so I am not, maybe in 5 years, I'll be a person who could speak to you on this. But someone from the agency is going to be able to come in and go boom, boom, boom.
Who's gonna reach out to the agency? I'm looking to Ms. Ziklowski. Is there a special ed? I think we've had last year, the year before, a special ed sort of expert in this committee. Anybody's name jump to mind? I look only at you because you've been in this committee a lot over the past.
Yeah.
month.
I believe that the special ed director position is vacant right now.
At the agency, it is vacant. We will ask the agency for an expert who can answer these kinds of questions, since this is, it's a good point. We have time next Thursday.
But for Act 173, it's only students on an IEP.
Thank you. Now, we may.
Sure.
Do you want to take a 5-minute break before we go to the 2200 series? Is that
I
helpful?
got this.
Are you sure? Okay, you okay?
Yeah, let's take a 5-minute break after.
Okay. Let's take it now. Let's take it now. We'll take 5 minutes now, and we'll come back and do 2200 series. I'm specifically interested in the anti-discrimination stuff.
Oh,
So everybody
sure.
can jump into that a little bit.